Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for having us. We've got two subjects to discuss, MH17 and fake news. And let's start with fake news. You've heard the allegations from a Minister of Home Affairs. How did you feel about that?
Well, I'm somewhat reluctant to comment on what appears to be a domestic affair. Indeed, the Interior Minister communicating with the Dutch parliamentarians, knowing what the general mood is here, I'm afraid that whatever I may say may be interpreted as yet another evidence of the Russian interference. Therefore, I will just limit myself by making a couple of general remarks. There are lots of allegations now about Russia meddling into this, interfering into that. There is one famously known overseas TV channel. I used to watch this channel. This morning I watched it again, and one famous journalist hosted night guest lady, obviously political expert, and the subject was none other than the strategic mind of Vladimir Putin. There was this endless litany of complaints about Russian spies, Russian hackers, Russian meddling. Actually, the whole picture is very dark. Russia is portrayed like a kind of gigantic, pernicious octopus looming over the free world, poised to destroy the fragile democracy in the Netherlands, in Germany, in France, in the United States. It would have been ridiculous had not it been so sad. Well, actually, there were absolutely no evidence, no proofs to just confirm these allegations about Russian interference, Russian meddling.
If you allow me, they say there's sufficient proof, like, for instance, a Russian website with false information about MH17.
Let me just cite your example. There was a talk about Russia's interference regarding the hashtag named the Hennis debate here in The Hague. And this respected newspaper, NRC, Handelsblad, they tried to check the allegations about the massive use of the hashtag Hennis debate by the tweeters, presumably related to the Russian IP addresses. This investigation was carried out by journalists who are all but Russian sympathizers. Nevertheless, they were unable to find any confirmation of these allegations, and they just acknowledged it. Well, so
you're denying it?
Yes, we are denying any kind of interference, any kind of meddling. There is absolutely no proof.
Why would the Dutch government say something like that?
Well, it's become kind of a fashion. Not only the Dutch government, but some other personalities are saying this. It's kind of a fashion this tendency to depict Russia as an absolute evil. And we are just disappointed by this kind of picture made of Russia.
Does it harm the relationship between Holland and the Russian Federation?
Yes, you know, the relations between our country and yours are not at their best. And in this context, any unsubstantiated or unchecked allegations are not useful at all. And they are just keeping us from resuming full-fledged cooperation as it was the case before.
But is fake news, according to you, a problem?
Well, fake news, you know, it is about deceiving public opinion in order to get kind of political advantage. We in Russia, we don't underestimate this threat. Russian Foreign Ministry has a website where is and there is a section in this website about fake news, about unscrupulous methods being used by some media. So if you are willing to see this website, you are invited to do this, and you can check what is the picture regarding the fake news view seen by the Russian side.
You're denying the story, but do you understand that people who see this interview maybe think that you are trying to intervene in our democracy? I mean, we've heard the stories of the US elections where you tried it, so it's not unthinkable that you're trying it here as well.
No, we are not interfering. Our policy is about the necessity to develop cooperation, but without any kind of interfering.
But is it possible that not the state, but particular groups are trying to do this?
No, it is not the case. Well,
even not individuals.
You know, I've just expressed my disappointment about this kind of, how should I say, collective obnubilation. It's just turning into a kind of obsession about Russian interference. The Western media are very just vocal about this. But let me ask you the question, why these same medias, they're so strangely silent about well-established, well-known facts of interfering coming from the other side? I just refer to the facts of wiretapping, over eavesdropping by one overseas secret service that had been targeting not only ordinary citizens here in Europe, but also their leadership. It's just coming from the open sources. You can just put a request into the internet, wiretapping of some Western leaders, wiretapping of their personal mobile phones, and you will get 1,000 of hits just to this question, to this request. Let me tell you also that the budget of the National Security Agency in the United States amounts to $15 billion, whereas the overall military budget of the Russian Federation, armed forces, the overall budget is only $70 billion. Doesn't it speak volumes to you, or does it?
It's very clear what you want to say, but let me ask you one question about it. Is fake news, according to you, a problem? And how can we fight against it? Do we, like for instance, have worked together or not?
Yes. Let me remind you that Russia has been putting forward all kinds of initiatives in this respect. Last year, we submitted to the United Nations a draft convention on international security, information security. More recently, we submitted yet another draft UN convention on cooperation in fighting information crimes. But unfortunately, all these initiatives are systematically blocked by the Western countries. Just to refresh your memory, you may have heard that Russian and American president have agreed at some point about the necessity to set up a working group, Russian-American working group on cyber crimes, on cyber criminality. Unfortunately, there was absolutely no follow-up. So it's high time for all of us to understand that we are just in the same boat and we needed to cooperate for us to face, to address ever-growing number of new challenges and threats.
And specifically to the Dutch government, from the Minister of Home Affairs, what do you want from her?
I can just make any comments on the statements made by the Interior Ministry here. Like I said, it's not up to me to comment what she's saying, addressing, communicating with the Dutch parliamentarians. I'm just speaking on behalf of the Russian policy, which is not about interference, any kind of interference. We have been advocating the policy of the cooperation, and there was absolutely no proof against Russia regarding its interference. It's pointless to speak about Russian interference at all.
Okay, enough about fake news. We're going to MH17. First of all, could you tell us how many times did the Dutch legal request or ask for your legal help, and did you approve in all of those requests?
Well, I will start maybe by some general remarks. You know, Russia is committed to shedding light to this terrible tragedy of MH17, which claimed so many lives. Those who are guilty of this crime should be held accountable. This goes without saying. It's our straightforward position. Russia initiated the adoption by the United Nations Security Council of the Resolution 2166 that called for a comprehensive and thorough investigation. All these years, we have been trying to be helpful, providing the Dutch investigators with all kinds of elements, necessary elements, including the results of the natural size experiment carried out by the Buk missile manufacturer, the company Almaz-Antey. More than a year ago, the Russian side provided the joint investigative team with the raw data information, which is of critical importance to understand what had happened and how it all occurred. So we're still waiting for the reaction of the Dutch side, and this is the response to this question that you may have in mind about the latest regarding the MH17 tragedy coming from the Russian side.
Yeah, because you have sent like radar footage to the joint investigation team. Do you know if you have sent any other evidence yet?
Yes, the raw data radar information is something which is of critical importance, and this was claimed, this was requested both by families of the victims, by some Dutch parliamentarians, and we just listened to these requests, and we provided the Dutch government, the Dutch prosecutors with this information.
Do you have, do you have trust in an independent investigation from the joint investigation team?
Well, our principal position is about the necessity to carry out comprehensive and thorough investigation. When we initiated this resolution, I referred to 2166. One of the provisions of this resolution was about the necessity for the investigative team to report on any significant developments concerning the investigation, to report to the Security Council of the United Nations. And still now, until now, I have no knowledge about any kind of these briefings for the United Nations Security Council members.
No.
So the transparency of this investigation leaves it to be much desired. Well, there are some questions that come to our mind. Just recently, there was this report about Bellingcat findings.
You mean the Russian general heard on the recordings?
The case of somebody from the Russian side, retired general involved in the whole matter. And it was provided by Bellingcat bloggers. Well, we needed to differentiate between what could be seen as truly professional investigation and the investigation by the homegrown detectives. But I'm coming to just another troubling thing. As soon as Bellingcat released this report, the joint investigation team made a statement, stated its readiness to study it very carefully and adjoin this to the dossier of the MH17. But again, we are asking the question, why the Russian information, the radar information, critical information, has not been treated as much?
So do you want to say that
1 year spent without any reaction from the Dutch side? In one case, there is just rapid reaction, swift reaction. We will study it carefully. We will adjoin to the dossier. And on the other side, the information, critical information, is just being studied for a year.
So do you say it's not a fair and balanced and independent investigation?
No, I am just pointing out to this discrepancy, to this kind of treatment. I can cite you another example.
But can I, now just to be specific, will you acknowledge the outcome of the investigation regardless what the conclusions will be?
So let's not anticipate. We will just wait for the investigation to be completed. and we will judge the investigation by its results.
But it's not fair and balanced right now. That's actually what you're saying,
No,
right?
I am saying that there are some questions in our mind. There is this information provided by these so-called detectives from Bellingcat. The reaction of the joint investigative team is quite immediate.
Yeah.
It's very valuable information. We will add it to the dossier, and we are still waiting for response regarding the Russian information, which, to put it clearly, has been claimed by the Dutch side. These are raw radar information, and there is still no response. Just admitted that there is kind of surprise in treatment of the information.
The story about Bellingcat was about the High General. Can you confirm that it was him that we heard on one of the recordings?
Well, again, let's differentiate. We needed to trust the professional investigation, and this is all about the allegations made by some kind of bloggers. So there are lots of speculation about MH17. You just cited this example, but quite recently there was a report about the appearance of a new witness, very important witness, a former major of the Ukrainian armed forces, whose testimony was somehow running counter this version just been put forward by the Bellingcat. So, there was absolutely no reaction on this score. Is this because this report about the appearance of a new witness, critical witness, has come from the Russian rather than the Western source?
I've got 4 questions left. If a Russian is a suspect in the MH17 prosecution, are you willing to extradite him?
Well, under the Russian constitution, if I'm not mistaken, Article 61, a Russian citizen shall not be extradited. There is no extradition rule in the Russian constitution. It is prohibited.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
But if a Russian is a suspect, are you willing to arrest them and set up like a video interrogation in Russia?
Well, just a couple of general remarks also. Russia is not bound to follow the decisions made by the foreign courts. We have known this. This is under the international law. Russia is not bound to follow this. But there are still possibility to treat some questions within the legal mechanism, legal assistance between our countries.
So it's not a no, but you have some conditions. Is that what I heard?
It will be decided upon the Russian criminal procedure law.
And last question about that, but if a Russian will be convicted by the MH17 court, are you willing to imprison him in Russia?
Well, yet again, this is highly hypothetical situation. The investigation is not over yet. Let's wait for the investigation to be completed. We will see how things will play out, and we will take our stance then.
But why is it so difficult for you to say yes or no on that question?
About what?
About imprison a Russian suspect if he
So the wording of the question presumes the liability of somebody from the Russian side.
Yeah.
But
It's just a question.
no, just to my knowledge, no accusations, no charges have been leveled so far.
No.
So no charges. Even the Dutch prosecutors have not said nothing, have not said anything about this.
But you have thought about it, right?
Let's not anticipate. I would not speculate on this one.
Okay. Final question. Do you even recognize the court that they are setting right up right now for the prosecution of MH17?
General observation also. Russia is known to be skeptical about all kind of interstate judicial mechanisms. You know, in the past we had some examples that were not overtly conclusive. I'm referring to the former International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia, for the former Yugoslavia, and also International Tribunal for Rwanda. And generally speaking, we are not in favor of setting up, creation some interstate mechanism, especially dealing with the acts regarding the civil aviation. Well, but in any case, we are skeptical, but we will see.
And why are you precisely skeptical? Is it because you don't believe in a fair trial?
No, we are skeptical given the experience of the former tribunals like this. So I will just limit by this remark at this point.
And may I ask you what you mean with skeptical? What the consensus will?
Skeptical about the effectiveness of this mechanism. Regarding these mechanisms, we can say that they were money consuming, not very effective, and somehow politicized the mechanism.
And do you have an alternative? An alternative?
Not yet.
Thank you very much for your time.